Democracy depends on a free press. Please support our independent journalism at democracynow.org/give. As we mark the 5th anniversary of the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, what the New York Times called one of America's most liberal cities, we end today's show with a new book that re-examines the experience of the civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, with police brutality and his sustained critique of police brutality in the North as well as the South. Jeanne Theoharis is a historian and professor of political science at Brooklyn College, author of 13 books about the civil rights movement and the fight for racial justice. Her new book is King of the North, Martin Luther King Jr.'s life of struggle outside the South. Welcome back to Democracy Now! Can you start off with another viral moment, an image of police brutality that you describe in your book? I watched you talk about it last night at the Brooklyn Public Library. The photo of Reverend Martin Luther King being arrested in 1958.
So, Dr. King, thank you for having me back. It's so great to be here. So this is 1958. Dr. King and Coretta Scott King have gone to see Ralph Abernathy in court. The court doesn't want him there. The police then start to harass him at the courthouse and then decide they're going to arrest him. They push her away. She's objecting. And they basically march him down the street. But there happens to be a photographer. And so as they're marching him down the street and into the police station, this photographer's taking pictures. And what they do when they get to the police station is they half Nelson him, as we see in this photo, onto the counter. They're like grabbing his arm and twisting it. You can tell he's in pain. And then once they get out of sight, because as you might imagine, they're mad. The police are mad that Dr. King, that somebody's been taking this picture. So once they get him in the cell, they kick him, they choke him, they try to break his arm. But this photo goes, in the terms of 1958, it goes out over the news wires. And it may be the first, it's certainly one of the first images of police brutality that make it into the mainstream news. Most mainstream news organizations did not cover police brutality, so this image is outrageous and it's outraging. And 2 weeks later, he comes to Harlem, and he's doing a nighttime rally on 125th Street, right down from Malcolm X's speaker corner, right down from where Johnson Hinton had been brutalized by police. And Dr. King talks about—
This is what year?
This is 2 weeks after. This is 1958. And he's there with thousands of New Yorkers, and he's talking about his own experience with police brutality. And Harlemites are angry, and they see themselves in him. And I think we often miss this as a key issue throughout the civil rights movement. We often put it in the South when Dr. King and many others are calling attention and protesting this across the country.
He said he was more scared in Chicago than he'd ever been in the South. But you talk about in 1964 in Harlem also, right. King decrying the police killing of an unarmed teenager, was sued by the New York police officer who killed the young man. And there was a march there that actually dwarfed the March on Washington in '63?
Right. There's huge marches what you're referring to is he calls for this officer, Thomas Gilligan, he calls what he does a murder, just like you were just doing about George Floyd, the police murder.
Well, and he was convicted.
And the cop sues him for damage to his reputation, and one of the, and all the newspapers then let the cop launder his reputation. So King comes to New York. Mayor Wagner invites King, thinking King is going to maybe help quiet down these protests. They're massive protests for days. And instead, King, in a series of meetings with the mayor, says you need to fire the cop. You need to have real civilian complaint review board. You need to have a jobs program. You need to desegregate. Mayor Wagner rejects it all. And basically, King is almost run out of town for the notion that he's calling for a kind of real civilian oversight of the police. And this is 1964 right here in New York City.
Professor Theoharis, we just have a minute, and we're going to do a post show and post it at democracynow.org to talk about the revelations in this book. How could we be talking about revelations about Dr. King? Because he's been written about so thoroughly, yet it's this radical history, especially around police killings of black men and women, that you say has really not been thoroughly documented.
I mean, I think we've Southernized Dr. King. And so his critique of police brutality outside the South, his long-standing critique of school segregation, of housing segregation, of job discrimination. King sees these as national, not local. But again, we've told a story where King is in the South till 1965, and somehow then, when Watts erupts, then he discovers the North, when in fact Dr. King had been in LA more than 15 times before the Watts uprising, had been protesting around police brutality for years, joined a movement in 1962 protesting the police killing of Nation of Islam Secretary Ron Stokes, had talked about, this is King, no compromise on this issue in LA in 1962. In 1963, calling LA as segregated as Birmingham, even while he's engaged in the movement in Birmingham. But we tend to see that as a Southern story when King is talking about everywhere.
And that's why you titled the book King of the North. We're going to talk more about it at democracynow.org. Jeanne Theoharis, historian, new book, King of the North, Martin Luther King Jr.'s life of struggle outside the South. That does it for our show. Happy birthday to Mike DeFilippo. Coming up Memorial Day, our special, we speak to acclaimed filmmaker Ryan Coogler about his new film Sinners, and to Keith Lamar on death row in Ohio. Look for our new job listings. We're hiring a senior headline news producer, a director of audience, director of technology. Go to democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.